right, well, thank you again for joining Evolve IP's webinar, Data Backup, Disaster Recovery, and Business Continuity, What's the Difference? Why 24 minutes? Well, as I said earlier, we generally figure that you can give us a half hour and it's going to take us 6 minutes to get everybody logged onto the webinar. Plus, we're Jack Bauer fans, so it's one of the reasons why we go 24. It's also very hard to time yourself to get 24 minutes in, so we're going to do our best here. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Scott Kinka. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Evolve IP, and I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel here. Neil, why don't you let us know who you are?
Hi guys, how you doing? My name is Neil Reedy, and I manage our cloud computing product.
Hi, my name is Eric Doherty, and I'm the pre-sales design engineer for the cloud computing practice.
Well, fantastic. So today's webinar, Data Backup, Disaster Recovery, and Business Continuity, What's the Difference? These terms are fortunately used interchangeably, and we'll explore that a little bit today. The topic is to discuss how these terms differ, and hopefully to provide the attendees of the webinar and those who are going to view this online later some critical information to help them decide what they need. So, without further ado, let's start at the most basic of topics, data backup. Everybody has one, or at least we hope so. Eric, why don't you give us a little bit about data backup, what it is, and kind of where it ends. Let's start there.
Sure. Data backup is a copy of a company's data that can reside in different locations, should reside in a different location, I'll say, for the purpose of being able to restore it in the event of some sort of a data loss. Okay,
so let's explore that a little bit further. First of all, what do we mean by another location? Give us an idea.
Well, that can be as simple as another server or a disk in the same room as the production server, which isn't recommended but happens quite often. It could be a set of tapes that are rotated through, and as we've said many times in the past on calls, hoping that they're not just being stored in somebody's trunk or on the desk next to the computer that's being backed up. It could be a secondary data center or a branch or satellite office, or it could be in the cloud.
Got it. And then obviously we're doing that to protect from data loss. So describe data loss for us. What are the types of things that a typical business will be trying to get around, protect themselves from related to data loss?
Data loss can be from the obvious server crash where you need to restore the files to possibly new hardware. It could be as simple as a user's "oops, I deleted that file" moment where they overwrite or delete the work that they're needing to get to. It could be data corruption, or it could be a much larger event in a disaster type scenario.
Gotcha, but sort of the more common ones are the "oops, I deleted that file," right?
The smaller ones are typically the day-to-day needs.
And that always happens to be somebody with a C in their title, right? They
absolutely. More important, more often it happens.
I can say that, right?
You can absolutely say
that. All right, I get it. So data backup ends with copying something somewhere, really, at the end of the day, and we hope that's a safe spot. So let's go a step up. Neil, we're going to pull you into the conversation here. Disaster recovery. How is it different? Where does disaster recovery take us?
Great question, Scott. And we see this all the time. Disaster recovery is more of a strategic technology initiative, bigger than just a backup, bigger than just where is it, when was it taken. When we talk about disaster recovery, we're talking more about the holistic IT infrastructure. So the systems, the networking, the completely encapsulated IT infrastructure.
Got it. So we're beyond just having a copy of the data, and we're focusing on where the data is going to go if we had to bring it back for all intents and purposes.
Absolutely.
Easy way. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So let's also define the word disaster for a moment.
Sure.
You know, is this fire, flood, pestilence, rivers running red, or are we talking a little bit less than that?
It's a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And the industry has coined disaster with like some of the images we see on the screen with your fires and your floods. But the reality is it could be human related, it could be human incident or human error. It could be major or minor. We like to use the term incident just because there's much more reality when you talk to an executive or a business leader. An incident is much more common than a real disaster.
So an incident, a virus.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Crypto locker.
Okay.
Anything that could potentially impact the company's data systems.
All right, so now we're building up the story, right? Data backup is we've got ourselves a copy. DR encompasses the other places where the data might go, either the systems where the data was, or the systems that we're going to restore to in the event that they're no longer there. We lump data backup in here because it's a logical place to start, but the two terms that really are together all the time, it's the DR/BC, right? That's the thing we constantly hear. In fact, we get the Freudian slip always. We get the disaster continuity and business recovery, thing, because we're so used to slamming these terms together. So Eric, I'm going to come back to you. Business continuity, how is it different? How is it the same? Kind of put it in the context of disaster recovery.
Business continuity is all about the planning and the preparation for how to deal with getting people access to your systems, to your data. And it goes beyond even talking about the technology. Technology isn't even really part of a BC plan. The BC plan is more about how do your users get back in, be it, how are your phones answered? How do people get to work? Where will people work?
Got it.
More along those lines as opposed to just, can I get the data back online? Technology really doesn't have much to do with the continuity plan. DR is part of business continuity because if you're not recovering that data in that type of disaster, then you don't really have any way to have any business continuance.
Got it. Okay, so recovery really is, again, it's back to getting systems back. And continuity is really about and I guess that's why it doesn't say data continuity, it says business continuity, right? It's about getting the business back at their systems, back at their data.
That's right. And most people think of them in two different ways. They think of, many times when you think about it, people think of business continuity or disaster recovery, I apologize, and they're thinking about those major events, the floods, fires, pestilence, like you were saying. In business continuity, yes, it encompasses those, but it's simple things, and this is how most people think of it, having sure I have a second network connection so that if the internet fails,
got it.
I can still continue to do business.
Okay, makes sense. So it's even getting a little bit more granular into just kind of having plans around the small things, the regular things, the power outage, the connection going down,
Yes.
Makes perfect sense. So then that begs a question, right? The question is, so what? Right at the end of the day. So we know we've got a copy of the data. There's our data backup plan. We know that we've got a disaster recovery plan when we start thinking about the systems we're recovering to. When we plan out how we're using those systems, we're kind of branching over into BC. But for our customers, okay, great. So we've just defined that. What does that mean? What's functional? What kind of decision do I have to make? So now that we're there, let's kind of work to lay out some of the terms that if we were engaged with a prospect on a new opportunity or with one of our customers to put their plan together, the kind of questions and terms that we'd be asking them. So I'm going to pop a few things up on the video portion there, but for the remainder of us here, we want to talk about some critical terms. So we're going to talk about recovery time objective, RTO. We're going to talk about recovery point objective, RPO, and then we're going to talk about retention and archiving and what they mean in terms of the timing of data. So, and really what these are is to give the group of us online, us as the cloud services provider, and our customers, prospects, partners who may be on the phone, sort of a common context to have this conversation. So let's do them each individually. Neil, I'm going to go to you on this one. So RTO, RPO. We're getting buried in acronyms every day, but these are as important an acronym really as DR and BC, frankly. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview, again, RTO, RPO,
Sure.
What they mean and differences, if you would.
Great question again. RPO and RTO are two very critical conversational pieces that we start every time we talk to our prospects. RPO is recover point objective. RTO is recover time objective. And if you guys can see up on the screen here, we have a slide that really has right in the middle there an event. Maybe that's a ice storm where the entire business is offline. Maybe it's a developer who accidentally dropped a table and now database is inoperable.
Okay.
So the event is in the middle. If you look to the one side, in reverse time, you basically have your RPO. So the other way that we look at RPO is how current is that data once we have the disaster.
Okay.
So to the other side on the slide there, to the right of the incident, we basically have the RTO, which is recover time objective. Now that we've had our incident, how quickly or how long will it take for the customer to bring their operations back online after the incident?
Got it. And by back online, we're talking about with data as far back as the recover point, right? Is that
exactly?
Got it. So let's. I want to try to summarize that in a little bit of a different way, and you tell me if I'm online. Very simply, recover point is and we can be varied in these answers depending on the type of system, but recover point is how far back the data goes. Is it from last night's backup, as an example? Maybe everything crashed at 3 o'clock, but if our last backup was midnight last night, well then we've got a gap in recover point from current data back to what we can restore to, right? Recover time on the flip side is how quickly I can get back last midnight's file. So is it, as businesses are planning their DR and then their adjoining BC strategy, right, Eric? Is it possible that they have systems that they're more than comfortable having a RPO that's way back, but has to be, an RTO's got to be immediate, or vice versa? I'm sorry.
Sure.
The data's got to be immediate on the recover point, but we could wait 2 days. Give us an example
Absolutely.
of that. Yeah.
So a couple examples there. When you have a customer and an organization that relies on their IT infrastructure to provide revenue for the business, in one case, software as a service organization. So their RTO and RPO are both within 60 minutes to 2 hours, say.
Okay.
So they're always at least an hour, for example, behind. And if they did have an issue, they would be roughly an hour until they can get back online. So in that organization, that's an acceptable policy, and that data is always accessible and easily brought back.
Yep.
We have other examples where customers might have some manual procedures. It's not a software company, it's not a service provider, it's a manufacturer. And orders, for example, can be placed in the system. If there was a disaster, they want to make sure they still have those orders, but the people on when manufacturing and on the shop floor can all perform manual procedures. They don't necessarily need to get their systems back in 2 hours. They can go 2 days, for example, shuffling paper. As long as their data is current, they can go for a sustained amount of time.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of businesses, maybe it's even like a doctor's office or something like that, where you can't lose data, you can't not have seen patients for 12 hours, but, we scribbled down, prescriptions for a long time on pads, right? On a go-forward basis, we can re-enter those orders, we just can't lose. So in that case, recovery point's much more important than recovery time, maybe as an example.
Correct.
So every business, Eric, is going to have to come to a conclusion on what systems fall into what categories, right? To some
Absolutely.
extent,
It has to be a system by system or a server by server decision of what that recovery time and recovery point should be.
Is it common, Neil, for businesses to kind of stage their different applications into different RTO and RPO requirements?
Absolutely. So as part of the DR onboarding and as part of their DR planning, we typically will consult customers and encourage them to architect their DR strategy in such a way where they're segmenting some of their systems based on urgency and priority.
Got it.
So there's absolutely, in all cases, we've always seen high priority. Sometimes there's a middle and then a lower priority, and those systems can be brought up appropriately.
Got it. And to some extent, the business's spend on DR and on BC can be commensurate with those levels, too.
For sure.
Right. So, okay, makes sense. Let's bring up another topic around, it kind of falls more into the terms of backup, but it's kind of tied in with recovery point a little bit. And this is the concept of retention versus archiving. So, Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's a retention versus an archive? How are they different? What do they mean from a timing perspective?
Sure. Retention is the a version or versions of historical backups that are kept available nearby for restore. That would be like the local disk that we were talking about, or the tapes. Okay. Generally, they're no older than days, weeks, or months. So they're relatively recent as well because they're needed quickly and they're needed to replace something current. Archiving, on the other hand, what that is usually a searchable system with older data on it that many times is kept for needs for litigation or legal hold, for regulatory needs. That somebody's going to ask for data that could be years old, and it's going to be able to need to be searchable and found relatively easily, but not as quickly and as real time as you may need on a backup where you're counting your retentions.
So I'm going to make an assumption here. Retention is a much more critical conversation as it relates to DR and BC, really, because you've got to have a recent retention, quote unquote, right, to be able to get your recovery point in a lot of cases.
Absolutely, and that's where they go hand in hand.
And archiving really is that sort of offloading of the every hour, every day backup into a longer term archive. Not readily available at the fingertips right now, but it has a searchable mechanism to be able to get that data. Like I said, regulatory, legal, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Do certain industries have requirements legally on how long they need to archive data?
Absolutely, and most of those industries know which ones they are. They have some body that they're being audited by, and part of their plans are always going to be, what are your archive policies, what are your retention policies? All of them are going to be dictated by that regulatory body.
Got it. Okay. All right, so we're going to throw 3 questions up on the screen and try to wrap this. We're 18 minutes into our 24, so we're going to want to get to some questions. What are the 3 primary questions really at the end of the day? I mean, the first one is, and we're hoping everybody says yes to the first one, do you have a copy of your data, right? There's the data backup discussion. The second one is, how do you go about bringing a copy of your data online? Surprisingly, in 2014, we are still shocked at the number of customers and prospects that we meet with, in design meetings, guys, that have a backup but really haven't considered how they're going to get that back, right? And with no even DR plan, that recovery time, right, the future piece is way out. It may be go to Best Buy and get a new server kind of length of time, right? And then the third one really is, once you get that up, how are users going to get there? Great, I can bring a server up, I can restore it, I can stick it in a data center for somebody, but if there's no network, there's no VPN in the houses, there's no means to get to it, great. I've got an application running that nobody can use, right? So there's really those 3 components. Do I have a copy? Data backup, simply. How do we go about bringing it back? DR. And then how are we getting people to it is really what we consider to be the business continuity aspects of it. Thankfully, and not going to get too deep into the product-oriented aspects here, but Evolve IP has multiple offerings to target various RTO and RPO levels around data and data backup products as well. A little kind of simple chart that we're throwing up on the screen there relative to some decision making that you can make. The only thing that we would encourage you to do is engage our folks. We'll have a call to action at the end of this with a number that you can use. We'll certainly be reaching back out to you with an email in the next few days with a video of this presentation so that you can refer back to it in the future. What we'd like to do right now is open the floor up to some questions. With that, we're going to bring you back.
Hi, I have a question. It's more on a personal level. I wanted to see if it could be applied to a disaster recovery situation.
Okay.
Okay. If I have my computer stolen and I have personal data, mostly pictures on it,
Yep.
Is that a disaster or is that a high availability problem?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what those pictures mean to you, certainly. I would consider it a disaster, particularly in the first scenario, which is, let's go back to our questions, right? Question number 1, do you have a backup of the pictures?
No.
All right, so, I mean, clearly we're unfortunately not even in a position necessarily to have a disaster recovery strategy because, you see how these topics build on top of each other, right? If you had a backup, then your DR plan is new device, download the pictures there, restore your backup procedures and policies. But without having a backup, without 1, there's no such thing as 2. Without 2, there's no way to have a plan for continuance on that, certainly. As I said, more on the personal note, I don't know what kind of device it was, but I'm hoping you have some kind of device tracking on there. Maybe is it a Mac or a Windows device?
It was actually 10 years ago. We were working it into a presentation, and in the presentation I actually said that it was not a disaster because it wasn't really related to business and it was related more to HA.
Yeah.
But then we got to thinking about it and we're like, well, was it really a disaster?
Yeah, and I think that was why we asked the question earlier about, what's a disaster, right? Does it have to be, rivers running red, right? Or is it really just something, it's actually a really good example. We see them as a step function, is the really easy answer to the question. Backup leads into the availability, the opportunity for you to have a recovery plan. The business continuity piece around it is how you enact the DR plan and how you're going to get at that data to continue doing the work that you were doing previously.
Theft is definitely a disaster. I have 2 experiences in past lives where companies had computer property stolen out of their buildings. And guess what? In one case, it was servers, so everybody in the office was not working while they figured out how to restore things. And in the other case, it was personal computers that had data on it that had not been copied to servers, and they had to recreate that data or find it other places. So was it a disaster to them? Absolutely. There doesn't have to be a mudslide or an avalanche for it to be a disaster.
Yeah, and one of the really common uses that we see, even though it seems like we're maybe even taking half a shot at data backup here, right? The reality of it is one of the uses, heavy uses for the product, one of the products on that slide that we were just talking about is the ability to back up field laptops without there being active involvement from IT for that specific reason, right? Grab the My Documents directory, grab the user folder that has any desktop storage on it where everybody has a tendency to throw files because they don't want to file them well in the My Documents, right? So that's a very interesting use for data backup, but it really does all start from there. You have to have the backup to have a plan for restoration. Any other questions? It's a very good one, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question about that chart that you just had up.
Sure.
There was a column at the beginning of the chart that said something about where our servers are now. What exactly did that mean, and what's the relevance of that?
It's a great question, and selfishly, that really on our end is how we determine if we have a product that we can map to. So if you were to sit down and go through the logical conversation that we were just sort of mapping out with one of these design resources who are here at the table with me, they'd start with the explaining RTO, explaining RPO, and working together to say, this system is high priority, this system is medium priority, this system is low priority. But then when we get down to actually mapping a potential solution to it, the first question that dictates what our opportunities are is, what's the source of the data? So meaning, is that data currently on a physical Windows box? Is that data currently on a cloud service with Evolve IP? Is it currently on a locally based hypervisor, so it's been virtualized, but it still happens to be on site? Those are really about the source of the data. And the source of the data on our end dictates the level of automation, frankly, we can build towards creating a plan by leveraging standardized products. So it's a great question, thank you. You'll notice right after that, it's what's the source, and then what's your desired RTO, what's your desired RPO, and that sort of directionally gets us towards specific offerings that we have that we can kind of bring into the fray. And obviously that's a conversation we'd love to have with you based on our call to action at the end here. We're not selling in the 24 minutes, and I think we're at 25 right now. So we have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap if we have any more. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time and your participation. Did we have one popping up there?
Yeah, I did have one question.
Go ahead.
Coinciding with that last question.
Sure.
If a customer has both physical on-site servers as well as a virtual or a VMware build-out, am I right in assuming that you can combine a couple of those different products?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every one of these scenarios, both from a hosting perspective, if you were talking about virtualizing at all, as well as virtualizing the DR as a service, the word hybrid's becoming, one of the most oft-used adjectives in the business that we're in, right? Whether that's cloud hosting production systems or cloud hosting DR solutions. So absolutely. Might the policies or procedures be slightly different depending on the source? Absolutely. I think you can see that from the diagram. It drives us in one direction or the other. But absolutely, hybrid is, is part of where we're living every day. And depending on your source, we can build a solution that spans multiple products. Great question. And in the interest of time and our promise to keep this at slightly under 30, we're going to wrap. I'd like to thank everybody for your time and participation. We hope you found the webinar useful. On the screen is some contact information that you can use for further questions. Some of you may already have a direct relationship with a sales resource or a partner manager on our side. If not, leverage the information on the screen. And we will be sending out an email in the next day or two with a wrap-up of this presentation, a video of it, a little bit of video of us here in the room as well, to round that out. Not that you're waiting for that with bated breath, but we're hoping to add some color to the presentation. So thanks everyone for your time, and have a great day.